In this video, I want to discuss demarcating or emphasizing the difference between traditional yogic philosophy as told by Patanjali and the other commentators such as Vyasa, Vachaspati Mishra, etc., around 500 CE and onwards, like 1500 years ago, and somewhat modern interpretations of yoga as people who practice, asana today, people who practice physical postures, certain members of the New Age community. And when I say New Age community, not in a disrespectful way. What I mean is, people combining ideas of chakra, certain mantras, people combining crystal healing, etc. Combining different ideas and principles and whatnot and practices, putting them together versus traditional yogic philosophy, as told by the gurus and the teachers that are following lineages and whatnot. And this is a very important difference. And there are many differences that are very, very important. I feel that they need to be highlighted. And so I'm making this video for this reason. Now, in conversation with, let's say, certain yoga teachers or some people who are practicing yoga, like the physical postures, whether you go to a yoga studio or whether you just, run into someone who practices yoga, or, people who are part of the New Age community, people who are really into crystal healing or tarot card reading or different things like that, I feel that there is unfortunately a diluting of the yogic philosophy that is as originally said in the scriptures to what is being interpreted today. And this is problematic because it's not paying attention and not giving respect to the authority of the tradition and what is being said in the tradition. That's number one. But number two is that by not doing so, you are extracting the practices and the effects of the practices from their original context. Patanjali talks about meditation in conjunction with celibacy, in conjunction of a certain diet, a very strict diet, in conjunction with certain not intaking certain substances such as alcohol and etc. All of these come together to enhance the practices. In psychology, we could study that by looking at interaction effects, right? How the independent variable A affects independent variable B, right? Independent variable A affects dependent variable B, right? But how independent variable A can mix with other independent variables, right? So A, B, C, and D. You look at a mixture of factors and how that could affect the dependent variables. So if you want to study the effect of diet and blood pressure, you can study how a person eats and what the blood pressure is like, but you also can affect blood pressure by having diet, stress levels, alcohol intake, etc. So in the same way, when you look at Patanjali's practices or the Yogasutra practices or the Hatha Yoga Pradipika practices, what's happening is you're seeing a bunch of these practices put together. And they're put together for a reason. They're like a spider web. They're like a web interdependent upon each other to enhance the practices moving forward of meditation, calming the mind, etc. But what's happening is in these modern interpretations, we are adulterating and loosening these practices and not taking them very seriously. So for instance, like meditation will be extracted, but a lifestyle of alcohol intake will be consistent, or meditation is extracted, but a lifestyle of certain diet or meat eating, etc. will be there, which Patanjali and the practitioners are very strictly against. Now, why is this important? See, let's look at two things here. Number one, Patanjali clearly says in chapter 2, right? Brahmacharya pratisthayam virya labha. So, Brahmacharya pratisthayam, on the establishment, right? On the establishment of celibacy, Brahmacharya, on the establishment of celibacy, virya labhaha, virya, power, energy, right, vitality, labhaha is attained. So when one is established in celibacy, then power or energy or vitality is attained. Okay? Now, in Ashtanga Yoga, 8-limbed yoga, there are the yamas, right? The observances that you have to do. One of them is brahmacharya. Now, it says very clearly that brahmacharya being one of the yamas are the mahavratya, the vows that one has to take if one practices Patanjali yoga. And this, in the very next sutra or subsequent sutras afterwards, it will say, this vow is not dependent upon time, place, and circumstance. Okay? So it doesn't matter what your circumstance is. It doesn't matter what time period you live in. If you take this vow, you must stick to this vow. If you practice Patanjali yoga, according to the Yogasutra, you must follow these particular principles. Now, the modern communities will reinterpret brahmacharya to say, we don't need to be celibate. We could have kids. We could have, we could hook up with people. We could do whatever. And let's reinterpret celibacy. And that can't happen, right? So, it can happen. Anyone's free to do whatever they want. But the thing is that that's not what Patanjali or any of the commentators afterwards were intending. How do we know that? You read the commentaries, the bhashyas, and you see how important celibacy is. Sense pleasure, how a person gives into sense pleasure, how a person identifies the false self, the ego, into sense pleasure, especially the sexual pleasure, right? And how that moves someone away from yoga or Patanjali yoga in this sense. So it's very clear the yoga philosophy is take it or leave it, right? Or the Patanjali yoga philosophy is take it or leave it. If you're going to follow this path, do it. If you're not going to follow it, don't do it. Don't mix things up. It's very clear according to Patanjali and the commentators. It doesn't say, you know what, yeah, you could have kids and you could practice this, or you could do, it doesn't say that, doesn't mean you can't, a yoga practitioner who has kids can't practice yoga. That's not the case. But what the point of it here is to respect the authority of the texts, to understand the authority of the text and not to reinterpret the text and say that the text says something differently. One can do whatever they like, but it's very important to not say or not think that the texts are justifying what you're doing. The texts are very strict. They're shastra. They say exactly what they mean. And of course, there's differences, and different commentators say different things. But if the texts say, if the Yoga Sutra says brahmacharya, celibacy, and here are the reasons why, there's no room in there to reinterpret it as, okay, you can get married, okay, you can have kids, okay, you can go hook up with people, And this is not a judgment. I'm not judging. This is just what is being said in the texts, And so I want to really emphasize the importance of here's what the texts are saying, and here's what you are doing, or here's what we are doing, what the community is doing. We should own up to what we're doing and not say that, okay, the texts are justifying what we're doing. Now, there are many other paths, for example, bhakti yoga or karma yoga for people who want to have kids, for people who want to have sex, or whatever the case is, under certain conditions. There are paths, or there are other paths, but it's very clear in Patanjali yoga that that's not the case. Now, another example is this. In Patanjali yoga, one does not have a profession, okay? Patanjali yoga is for people who leave society and go into a forest, okay? People leave society, they renounce the varnashrama system. They renounce their varna, so their class, brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, shudra, they renounce it, and they renounce the ashrama system. So the first 25 years being a student, the next 25 years being a householder, the next 25 years being a forest dweller, the next 25 years being a sannyasi, which is a renunciant. They renounce all that and go straight to the renunciant part, the sannyasi part. So in the Yoga Sutra, it's very important to understand that there is no profession. So when one is a businessman, or one is a, or even a professor, or one is whatever, right? That is still somewhat going to be a hindrance to the yogic path according to Patanjali, because you're withdrawing your senses away from the material world. There's no ambition. There's nothing you're trying to seek outside. And when you're in meditation, you're trying to reach samadhi, you're trying to get to that point, you're not fixated on the achievements or the statuses or the friends and social circles and things that you're trying to get. So again, this is another instance where, you can do whatever you want, be a businessman, be a lawyer, but also you need to pay heed and respect to the Shastra, where it says that Patanjali Yoga Sutra is for those who go into the forest. So if you try to reinterpret what you're doing for yourself, that's okay. But if you reinterpret it and say the text says that for you, then we have an issue, because that's not what the case is. And what you're doing is it's not being honest to the scriptures. It's not being honest to oneself. And so if we're not honest to oneself, we're not going to understand what the scriptures are saying, and we're not going to understand the interactions between every single variable that's very important in the text. Why is celibacy important for meditating? If one's mind is constantly consumed with sexual desire, constantly, every day, right? One is seeking it, one is identifying with their body, then logically it makes sense it's going to be a hindrance to one's meditation, because in yoga, more vrittis or more fluctuations are going to emerge in the mind. So now, this is not a judgment. This is just logically what follows according to what Patanjali and the commentators are saying. So the main purpose of this video is that respect to everyone, respect to whoever, modern asana practitioners, modern professors, anyone, respect to everyone. However, it's very important that the Shastra is the Shastra, right? Like, Shastra says what it says. It's not a matter of being a traditionalist or a matter of being a fundamentalist. The text says what it says. If we try to manipulate the text for what it says, or what the commentators are saying, we're not really being honest to what it's saying, If it's open for interpretation, that's a different story. If you look at the Yoga Sutra, you will see that celibacy or having a profession, or eating meat, right? These things are non-negotiable. These things are the great vow. According to time, place, and circumstance, you cannot violate these, right? So it's one thing to say, like, okay, I'm gonna practice yoga to the best of my ability, and I'm gonna, occasionally, I'll give in to these sensual desires and I'll do whatever. But it's another thing to say that what I'm doing is right because the text says it, and that's not right. So I wanted to make this video to outline these differences and, humbly, respectfully, I feel that this is important. So, yeah, we'll talk about another concept in the next video.